Good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you again. As you know, I've had the opportunity to brief the Council for the second time. It's a monthly briefing, and we spoke on progress achieved to date. We spoke, of course, on the preparation for the very critical phase 3, which is the removal out of country of the most critical chemical agents. We went a little bit into the details of the what and the how and the work of the joint mission, but of course also very mindful of the continuous volatile conditions in country, in an active war zone, the security measures we need to continue to undertake, and we spoke of the constructive cooperation with the Syrian authorities. The question always is the deadlines. Ambition levels are very high. Questions asked, can you do it? Will you do it? Our response is we've done everything we can. Joint mission, the Syrian authorities are preparing. There's full international support. The effort is there. We are prepared. And now we need to see to make sure that we can actually do it. I'll take questions.
Do you have to move the chemical weapons inside Syria to Latakia safely? What kind of options you have? Is the Syrian army equipped with the armored vehicles and equipment to do this job?
Well, there are three issues that your question, in a way, is looking into. One of them is, of course, that the destruction of the chemical weapons program in Syria is the responsibility of the Syrian Arab Republic. Within that, of course, they are fully responsible also for the security component. And that is a plan they have designed, they are fully cognizant of, and they are preparing and investing in that. The second part of your question, of course, is what can be done, needs to be done, is currently happening in order to ensure that logistically, in terms of safety of packaging of the chemical agents, the repackaging, the preparation of the containers, is that on track? Yes, that is on track. And all the logistical requirements that we have asked for as a joint mission in support of the implementation are in country. There are a few items that are coming a little bit later, but that doesn't derail any part of the process. When it comes to actual overland passage, I think this is part of security sensitivity, but it is all being revisited, it's assessed, and of course there are security constraints that are serious, and we have highlighted it in the Secretary General's report. We speak about it frequently. An example, the road connecting Damascus-Homs, it's a main artery, as you know. If we cannot travel there, it's a real issue. I had to travel, for instance, to Latakia via Lebanon using a helicopter to make sure I was in the port, discussed with the authorities, and looked at the conditions and making sure that that part of the plan, the understanding by the Syrian authorities, was clear. So there are issues, there are factors that are beyond our control, and we have to be open about that. We have to also know, however, that we're all doing everything that is possible to mitigate to the extent possible.
One at the back.
Yeah, you right here. Hi, thank you. Could you give us some sense? I mean, you talked about the difficulties of getting there. I mean, is there a possibility that you may not be able to carry out this mission through Latakia? Are you looking at other possible, routes to take it out of the country, either through Lebanon or elsewhere? I mean, do you really think at this point, I mean, it doesn't sound like you can get through the roads now, that you'll be able to do it in the next couple of weeks or whenever you plan to move the stuff?
No, Latakia is a designated port for exit of the chemical agents. It's chosen by the government. The port has been assessed as functional, capable of handling this process. It can invite the vessels to come of those member states that have indicated they will dedicate commercial vessels for the operation to be part of the removal out of country. That is all. I think that is very clear. If there are delays due to security conditions, we have to assess and revisit that, of course. But for now, we don't assume any alternatives. This is the viable, best assessed option, and we just need to make sure that it can happen.
Sure, thanks a lot. We were still told that in your briefing you said that a UN staff member was killed yesterday. Was it a member of the mission or some other?
No.
And also, I mean, if you could describe that to some degree. And also, what do you make of the criticisms that transfer of these chemical weapons at sea, let's say to a U.S. ship, might be dangerous, and that actually destruction of them at sea? Is there precedent for this? How are you going to assess the sort of environmental safety of the plan?
Yes, we spoke in more general terms of basically also national UN staff members who who are victims of conflict. And yesterday there was one such instance, so I was told earlier this week, and I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that it's not just international staff, it is obviously first and foremost the citizens who are always affected in times of conflict. And of course in this case also we have national staff members who are very dedicated to the mission of the organization, the UN. I felt that was important to raise as an example. In terms of the criticism, or concerns rather, I think, because a lot of the concerns that are reflected in the media are probably based on an absence of full information available to the public. So I think currently what is happening, we are told that this is technologically very feasible. It is assessed for all safety and public health possible risks and concerns. We are in close contact with UNEP. UNEP has deployed a staff member that will be working with us to make sure that in country the environmental components of the entire operation are assessed against standards. The chemical agents, as you know, will be packaged in accordance with international maritime organizational standards of hazardous good for the transport. So every mitigating material is happening. I am not aware that this operation has ever been carried out in this way. Of course, hydrolysis is also a fairly relatively new technology, but it is all very manageable. That said, in life, one can never exclude anything from happening and going wrong. So I have to be very pragmatic about it. However, we also have to know that we're making the investments in expertise, staff time, all criteria, and the member states involved, the US and others, they take this very, very seriously. And of course, the countries, the international community, Security Council, ourselves, Joint Mission, Secretary General, Director General, high priority, public health component inside Syrian Arab Republic, an environmental component of any possible risks, but equally so, of course, for onwards transport on the vessel. However, the containers will be sealed. There is no assumption whatsoever that when at sea or in the transloading that the containers will even be opened. So again, that's a further risk mitigation. What we're also working on is actually a little bit of a explanation, sort of your average public awareness, to sort of explain that what we're dealing with, particularly when the chemical agents have been destroyed through a process of hydrolysis, that we're dealing with chemical materials that are shipped day in, day out across the globe. We just don't happen to know about it, but in line with commonplace safety standards. And I think that's very important to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaag. Two questions. First, is there any discussion being given to actually having the ships that are going to be taking the containers from Latakia actually go to another port to be transferred to the U.S. Ship rather than doing it at sea, where it would seem to me there's a much higher risk? And also in getting the containers to the port of Latakia, has there been any consideration given to, for instance, if the roads are really terrible, to using helicopters?
On your first question, in principle, we're still awaiting confirmation by a member state that a port is available for transloading, so it will be transloading in a port. So that is the first point, that is the planning assumption. Secondly, the convoys, the trucks, the containers are such where on the different sites where we collect, have consolidated the chemical agents, or rather the Syrian Authority has, are of such quality that that part should be fine. Sort of the bumpy road and the container breaking up, I think, is not part of the scenario. What is always a risk, of course, is security conditions. If there were to be a very localized conflict breaking out. That's why the Syrian authorities have invested a lot of time and effort in their planning for the security component under their aegis, of course.
What about funding, Mrs. Kaag? In the Secretary General's report, you mentioned funding and how much is in the trust fund now. Is that enough to see you through for how long, and how much more do you need?
Thank you. Different legs of sort of our joint mission come into play. I think the UN has very much, we operate from our assessed contribution from the regular budget, and we have submitted a budget also for next year. We've also relied for the UN staff very much on on the assets of the missions in the region and expertise that is deployed and lent to us from the different departments. Very much in line also with the spirit of the Secretary General to make sure the UN works as one, and when the best brains and minds and staff need to come together, they are released by the departments for purposes of this mission. The UN, however, has also a trust fund. Limited funding has come in. I think we would welcome some additional contributions to give us the leeway to look at perhaps some of the unforeseen situations that may still arise. OPCW, for the first trust fund that was established, has been fully funded, and you may recall that in the Executive Council of OPCW, a trust fund has been established to take care of the destruction of the chemical agents. That trust fund has received, I believe, a first contribution, but the estimated cost of the destruction for the out-of-country component of the chemical agents ranges between the 35 to 40 million euro, and it's very important that pledges come in of a significant nature. And member states, of course, can all be party to this important peace and security pillar of the effort through their financing of this endeavor. Because OPCW cannot actually contract any of the commercial companies that are needed for the treatment of the effluents, of the reactive mass that results from destruction, without actually, of course, having money in the bank. No organization can commit a contract, can sign. So we don't want to have any delays on that part of the equation.
Have you received any financial support from any Arab countries?
At the moment, not that I'm aware, but we of course would welcome financial assistance from the international community writ large. Thank you. Not that I'm aware, and we welcome it, so thank you for raising the question, and maybe this is a good time to appeal.
The country you said you're waiting on confirmation for the chemicals to be loaded onto the US ship, is that another Mediterranean port?
Actually, the geographic range is quite significant, so no, not necessarily, not only. At the moment, of course, we're discussing and we're hoping to have early confirmation soon.
Once the chemicals are on the US ship, will it be close to a port when it destroys
I think now
them?
we're in the realm of speculating the speculation, so maybe we keep that for next month.
Mrs. Kaag, you're training the Syrian experts in Beirut, I think on packaging, and so how big is the Syrian team? How many experts you're training in Beirut, and for how long this training, how long it will take?
Actually, the training's been completed. I signed the certificates. They are certified. It was a group of 15 that are now fully qualified in line with the standards needed, and they spent a week in Beirut, or maybe a little bit longer.
And you said for you it's not safe to go from Damascus to Latakia, so this is why you take Beirut-Latakia road. Is this could be an option for the chemical weapons also to move them out of Syria?
It's not under consideration at all. We did this, and I used it as an example to highlight how situations can change. 2 weeks ago, I could have traveled by road, or rather, we could have traveled by road, because it's not about me. In this case, I wanted to go to Latakia. It was time sensitive. I wanted to have been for planning purposes, discussions, and in order to brief the Council on the basis of a very recent visit. However, we hope that the situation will change, of course, and that the route will be open again. But we're not considering other routes currently at all.
To what extent have you been able to coordinate with rebel groups? And of course, there is the Al-Qaeda affiliated groups that probably you're not able to engage with. I mean, to what extent is that a concern, and to what extent are you satisfied that at least you've been able to coordinate with some of the key rebel groups on the ground for safe transit?
I've recently traveled to Istanbul, or Ankara, for meetings with the government of Turkey, but also Istanbul to meet with representatives of the opposition groups. Those have endorsed the Russian-American framework agreement around the chemical weapons elimination program. They support it. Of course, at the same time, for operational day-to-day decisions around the security access, there is long-standing, ongoing contact with different local groups to make sure that the role of the mission is understood, that our staff don't get caught in crossfire inadvertently, as may be the case, and that we can secure access to the extent possible to sites we need to visit. Because as you know, a lot of attention is currently on phase 3, but ongoing verification and inspection efforts need to continue, as we also need to bear witness to the ongoing destruction that takes place of the facilities, of specialized facilities. So this is an ongoing effort as well on our part. Now, there are, of course, other groups that have a very different agenda, and that the UN or other internationals are considered a target. We are not in contact.
Thank you. My last question, please. We are still waiting for Mr. Sellström to finalize his report, but maybe you have an answer. Because the Syrian government accused the opposition of using chemical weapons, have you found any information that says that the Syrian opposition did use any chemical weapons, or maybe do they have any chemical weapons?
I think that answer is not for my mission. I invite you to await the report and obviously deal with the appropriate counterparts on that one. Thank you.
Thank you.